So thank you for coming to the last session of the conference. Hopefully you came here because you're interested in the topic and not because you don't have anything to do. So that's an honor that you all came here. And today I wanted to talk to you about a topic that we as web developers rarely put in the center of our attention, but I think as the time goes by it becomes more and more important. And we will not go deep into the field of data visualization, but I would rather like to talk about practical applications in web development, in our regular applications that we build every day, not some scientific projects and stuff like that. So data is eating the world. They say that every year we generate more data than in all previous history. I don't know if it's a fact, but sounds plausible. So how do you deal with all of this data? So if your name is Neo or you're an accountant, then maybe you are fine with a 1,000 by 1,000 Excel spreadsheet. It always fascinates me how accountants tell me, I don't care about your stupid charts, give me the table that is like 1,000 by 1,000, I can deal with it. But for the rest of us, like looking at nice charts and graphs makes way more sense and lets us analyze and perceive the data easier and better. So what's data visualization? I actually like this definition by Andy Kirk. So data visualization is the representation and presentation of data to facilitate understanding. Short and clear. So my name is Mendelevich. I come from Lithuania. So I started my web development career in like 1997, I think, maybe 1996. So in 2003, I was on the bleeding edge of JavaScript. I built one of the first and most known WYSIWYG HTML editors for the web. And then I sort of switched at some point to Windows development, and I did mostly native development for quite a while. I got an Microsoft MVP in Windows development for that. And basically, in the front-end world, I skipped the whole jQuery era, and now I'm mostly back to the web development. In addition to being the CEO at AdDuplex, I shall also help my friends at amCharts who build great charting library, and that's how I'm mostly involved with this field of data visualization. So, and the agenda for today is pretty straightforward. So I would like to talk about the past, the present, and the future of data visualization. And I like to define this period by the role data visualization played at the time. So in the past, we just used charts as an illustration for the other data that we have on the page. And currently, the charts are more engaging, more interactive. You can poke around, maybe see something. And in the future, I believe they will take a center stage and empower you to do way more things with just the data visualization and maybe without additional stuff in your web apps. So let's talk about the past for a bit and a cheesy quote why it's important. So in the early days, we just took the fixed width font, added some characters, bam, we have a nice looking bar chart. So later we realized that we can take a single pixel GIF, set like width and height on it, and again, we have an awesome looking bar chart. Who has done that? Well, quite a few people. Okay, and the laziest on the wall, create a chart in Excel, save it, put it in your page, you're done. So later came the era of server-side generators, and the key piece of software in the 90s was a tool called Webalizer. Anyone knows what it is? Anyone used it? Not many, but basically what it did, it was a process on your server that took your web server logs and generated nice, by those standards, charts and reports about traffic to your website, kind of like Google Analytics without the creepy tracking. So for those of you who haven't seen it, I will show you a quick demo. So interestingly, it's still alive. The web page is still live, and I like this part the most, like this awesome badge. So basically what it looked like, the report from it, you would see a report for, this is a report for 1999. So you would see the charts, you would see the tables, so quite decent looking even today, except for, all the tables. So later on we got server-side charting libraries. On the PHP side, we had JP Graph. On the .NET side, we had Dundos charts. Then Microsoft introduced ASP.NET chart control. And the final product in all this lineup was Google Charts, which now is a client-side charting library, but back then it was generating all the charts on the back end, and it was unique in a way that you passed all the data and settings via an HTTP request. Basically, you pass the data through your even the GET request and get an image in return. So despite being like static and non-interactive, the one huge drawback of all these libraries was that you had to generate those images on the server. And this is computationally intense task, especially when you need to do it for each user to your website with different parameters. So it takes a lot of resources from the servers around the world. So this brings us to present. So looking at this slide, you may think that Flash and present are insane. Alan, have you seen a hero in a Flash suit on the stage? So the point is that everything that we do with data visualization today was done in mid-2000s, mid-zeros with Flash. And when the writing for Flash was on the wall, we basically spent like 5 years trying to do the same in JavaScript and with JavaScript. So I think about 3, 4, 5 years ago, we finally caught up and started doing new things and started moving forward. And we are moving forward with JavaScript and SVG. So for certain like performance-intensive charting scenarios, Canvas or WebGL may be a better option. But for most like real-life charts, practical charts, SVG is the king. So everyone probably knows SVG as a vector graphics format. And those of you who has been in Natalia's talk today have seen a bit of manipulation of SVGs. But how many of you know that it has a complete DOM model that you can manipulate and do whatever you want from JavaScript with it? Okay, about more than half. But I will show a very quick demo to the rest of you. So this is very basic kind of chart made in SVG. So from the code standpoint, it looks like this. So you have here you have a line that is our axis, and then you have a rectangle at our bar, and then you have a bunch of other rectangles, and then we can animate one of those rectangles using SVG animations, and that's pretty simple. But the problem with that is that, as you can see here, neither IE nor like current classic Edge doesn't support it. But the good news is that a stable version of the new Edge is coming in January, and more importantly, it's not a big deal in general because we have 2 more options to animate our SVGs. We can animate them with our normal CSS animations, and then we can animate them from JavaScript. So basically, right here, we create a circle, set some attributes on it, and then we just animate it every 10 milliseconds, and that's it. Yeah, so manipulating SVGs by hand is possible and not very complicated, but it's quite verbose and prone to error because there are a lot of magic strings involved. So rather than doing that, you would probably want to use some library like SVG.js or SnapSVG. So something that would take that many lines in vanilla JavaScript would take just a line or so, or 2 lines with SVG.js. Or you can just use the charting library if you're building actual charts. So over here, we have a chart built with a library, with a very small library. It's like, I think it's like 10 kilobytes called Chartist. So what it takes to build a chart in Chartist, except for the boilerplate and data, is just 1 line. And with that 1 line, you get, the bars, you get the axis, you get the grid, and additionally, it's also responsive. So if you want to see amazing things that you can do with SVG, I highly recommend you watch this talk by Sarah Drasner. It's a bit mind-blowing. I will show you just one demo. I think it's from that talk as well. So, yeah, so this is all done with just JavaScript and SVG. Yeah, so what constitutes a modern data visualization library in 2019? So basically, the charts have to be interactive, so users can poke around, see, analyze the data. Then they are animated, so developers can point attention of the user to the right part where they want them to see it. And most importantly, they are client-side, so huge waste of resources was taken away from the servers and put on the clients, and where it's not a big deal to render one chart, but if your server needs to render a chart for every visitor to your site, it was a very big problem. So modern web charting libraries are using dashboards and various reports in infographics. So previously, if you wanted to build an infographic, you probably had to have a huge company or hire some design studio to build you a nice infographic. But companies like Infogram let you build nice-looking interactive infographics right there on the web without any other special tools, with just JavaScript. If you're interested in infographics, I highly recommend you watch this TED Talk by one of the most known names in the field, David McCandless. You'll see a lot of ways how data can be represented in awesome ways. So just one example, maybe some of you have seen this. So this is the map of the world with each country and what is most known for or best for. So if we zoom in into our neck of the woods, Poland is for some reason most known for currents. Does it make sense? It does? Okay, so if you look at my country, Lithuania, we have fastest Wi-Fi, and this is like 2016 version. They had a like 2010 version, where so fastest Wi-Fi is way better than what we had in 2010. Anyone knows what that was? Anyone wants to guess? So we were best at suicides. So fastest Wi-Fi, I'll take it any day over suicide. So if you like infographics, I highly recommend you buy books by David McCandless. So basically, these books have no text except for labels in infographics. Every page or 2 pages has a beautiful infographic with some facts visualized in an awesome way. So you can keep it as your coffee table book and spend 5 minutes once in a while looking at awesome infographics, or you can just spend 3 hours analyzing it and not notice where the time went. So modern libraries are used in BI tools like Power BI or Tableau. And so anyone here whose job title has data visualization in it? No one, that's good. No one will catch me in a lie then. Okay. So those people do exist. They have their own conferences, podcasts, blogs, and whatnot. And the tool of choice for most of them is the library called D3, which lets you do awesome stuff, but in a kind of more abstract way, in a way that is very awesome if you want to build very custom stuff, but sometimes it becomes way too complicated if you want to build like your regular charts. So let me show you just a few D3 demos. So this is basically your normal bar chart. It's slightly animated. And then you can make a polar chart that it's actually a clock. And then you can make some whatever. And you can do a lot of awesome things with D3. And I believe that in the future, D3 will continue pushing the limits of what can be done with data visualization on the web. But like more specialized libraries will bring that closer to people like us who don't have data visualization in our job title, who need to build awesome visualizations without spending days obsessing about it. So data tells stories, and realizing what the story is not an easy task, but once you do that, once you realize representing data in a visual way helps you facilitate understanding, transcend language barriers, and just make it easier for people to understand what you were trying to say. So one of the best, probably the best talk about telling stories with data is this talk by Hans Rosling, which is like 13 years old. It's a TED talk, you can look it up. So back then they had to build their custom software. I don't know what technology was used, but right now, basically, you can do the same with just the web technologies, and they actually did that. There is their site of their foundation is called Gapminder. So this is one of the charts that Hans shown, I think, in that presentation. It depicts the poverty in the world. So as you can see, in the 1800s, almost more than 80% of people lived in poverty. And as the time went by, that percentage started dropping and dropping and dropping. And now that we get to our days, you can see that only 10% live in absolute poverty. So you can feel a little bit better about the world today. Another story. So we often see articles in the media about climate change, global warming, and we get fatigued and we stop just noticing them, we just skip them. But when Antti Lipponen from Finnish Meteorological Institute visualized the temperature anomalies throughout the 20th century or something like that, and he generated a video and published it on Twitter, he got more than 10,000 reviews because people are attracted to visual things rather than reading articles. In this visual, you can clearly see how the temperature went up in 100 years. Again, he had to use, I think he did it in Python and generated some video on the server, and then he had it in a form of video, but there's nothing stopping you from doing the same thing or similar thing in JavaScript, and it can be interactive. You can walk around and look at it from different angles. Yeah. So who knows where this is? That's Hawaii. So how many of you have heard about the story a few years back that's about a false missile alert in Hawaii? Yeah, many of you. How many of you have heard about this website? Not a single person, right? So how many of you know what they have in common? Okay, I'll show you. Yes, so on a morning in Hawaii, people were browsing their Pornhub, like nothing is happening, like the traffic. This line represents traffic to Pornhub from Hawaii. It was like, sometimes more than average, sometimes less than average. And then at some point they got an alert that missile is flying to Hawaii, and the traffic dropped. And then the alert was canceled, and it went back up. It's business as usual. So previously, when we wanted to create charts that combined multiple chart types in one visual, basically this was reserved for infographics that some designer made. And I think so not all the data is good for that. Not in all cases you want to do that. But I think the main technical reason was that it was quite difficult to do with the libraries or with technology that we had at the time. But right now, nothing is stopping you from using and combining multiple charts in one visual where it makes sense. So even this one. So over here, you see that the background is actually, it's not an image, it's a map chart. And that clock in the corner, it's not some animation, it's a gauge chart. And this is obviously a bar chart. But these are just some charts overlaid and combined on top of each other. But you can actually do more than that, and you can combine charts closer. Additionally, you can use data visualization as your UI. So we kind of, from the static charting days, we got used that our chart is just an image, and then we have some drop-down or something. Like even if you look at Google Analytics, you have some drop-downs to select the date, some things to do the filtering, etc. And on the right side here, you see Power BI, where there is no additional UI elements except for the data visualizations. So you can just control the data from the visualizations themselves. And you can do, drill down scenarios with that. You can do filtering. You can just link outside. So a few demos about that. So over here you see basically a map. And normally, if you had to present some stats by country, you would either have a drop-down. On the best case scenario, you would click on a country, and it would open a different view that would show you the stats for the country. But why not just, when you click on a country, you show the stats right here. And you click on another country, you show the stats right here, etc. Or in the same chart that we've shown before about temperature anomalies, if you want to filter it by, say, region, you click on Europe, and you see all the stats for Europe, and we can then filter by country or just some specific aspect of it. This is the tree map of car sales in the US in 2017, and you can go into Ford and see all the models, etc. And the question I get here is, where is Tesla? And Tesla is still in other, at least in 2017. So over here. And actually, if you look at the best-selling cars here, so you see that Ford F-Series, which is a truck, or you see Ram, which is a truck, you can realize why they are building their Cybertruck. This is Power BI. So anyone is using Power BI? Yeah, so Power BI is Microsoft's BI tool. So this is just a random report. So here you can see the stats by weeks. So if you click on 1 week, you can see all other charts in the same report are filtered by that selected element in this chart. So you don't need to have additional UI elements to do that. And this is quite an esoteric example. You can just drag slices from one pie chart to the other. Maybe you will find a use case for that. Just separate some data into separate buckets. Yep. So we get more and more sensors, more and more IoT devices generating insane amounts of data, and we have to reason about that data somehow. So sometimes you need to show the real-time data, and if you get millions of data items every second or every minute, that's where you probably want to use SVG on WebGL-based charts, not in, Canvas or WebGL-based charts, not an SVG-based charting library. And also another scenario is that sometimes you get a lot of data and you actually don't want to see the raw data. You somehow need to aggregate it and show aggregate data. That's where modern charting library can help you as well. So as I said, when performance is your #1 priority, just look for Canvas-based or WebGL-based charting libraries. The same goes for machine learning and AI. Still, you can get a lot of data, and additional thing that you get here is not only the amount of data, but when the data goes through some black box that is AI or machine learning algorithm, you don't always know what shape of data you will get in the output. So you can create another AI that, based on the output, would guess which chart type is best suited for that data, or you can just give your users an option to switch chart types. And obviously, we live in a mobile world where everything has to be touch-friendly and responsive. So a few more demos. So this is a pseudo real-time chart. So here we get data every second. And this is an SVG-based chart, so all is fine. But if we got thousands of items a second, this Chrome would probably explode if it was done in SVG. But in Canvas or WebGL, this is a piece of cake. So here you can see that we have data coming in every 1 minute. And if we start to zoom out, at some point it gets very dense and hard to read. And then it switches to being aggregated in every 10 minutes. So this is all done on client side just by the charting library. You don't have to do anything to achieve that. So when you zoom out, it's still in 10 minutes intervals and perfectly legible. So this is, again, maybe you like showing data in circle charts, even though they mostly are not very user-friendly. But in that case, your users can do just this. And now I understand what it says. Or, your chart doesn't have to have a special shape. You can have this timeline that goes in circles on the page, and you have all the page to fit all the information you need, and it doesn't have to be linear or in some traditional shape. This is again Power BI, and they have this feature called Quick Insights. So what they do is they just take all of your data and put through some algorithms which try to find some patterns in it. So most of the stuff you get here is total nonsense. But sometimes you get quite interesting insights. But as you can see, all of these are different chart types, and I guess they have some algorithms that decide which chart to use for every piece of insight. But if you don't have the luxury of doing this on your end, you can just give the user an option to select which chart type to use. And this one is also a very typical scenario. So quite often you would get a data set where one item is a huge outlier. So if you display it in full scale, all the other bars would look more or less the same, tiny bars. So in print or in static media, designers started doing this thing in the middle, where they cut a piece of an axis out, and then then you can see everything, and all the other bar charts are easy to compare. But then data scientists, or I don't know, just people who care about data, started screaming that no, this is complete nonsense. You should never do this, because this skews the picture, and you actually think that the first bar is not even 2 times bigger than the second one, and in reality it's more than 10 times bigger. So, but we have JavaScript, we can do it interactively. So what we can do is, when you hover over this, you can see the full picture. When you get out, you can see this picture with a cutout, and you hopefully satisfy both camps, or they both hate you. Yeah, so touch, touch is touch, not much to say here. This is also not a very pragmatic example, but in some scenarios, I guess you can make sense what to do with this. And obviously, responsiveness. Oh, what did I do? So here, normally, if you have a pie chart, you want to place labels right next to the slices. So it makes more sense and easier to read for the users. But if you get on a smaller screen, and even smaller screen, it gets harder and harder to look at it and make sense of it. And at some point, you just switch to a legend that maybe not as good in understanding than a normal bar chart with labels next to the slices, but at least on the small screen it's still usable, and you can still make sense of all the data. Obviously, you should never forget about accessibility. Luckily, if you're working with SVG, it has all the same tools that you have in your HTML. You have all the role and area tag attributes, etc. And if you're using a charting library, just make sure, analyze their web page and make sure that they take accessibility seriously. Additionally, in the last couple of years, many of us had to deal with GDPR and stuff like that. And as users get more and more concerned about privacy, it gets more and more complicated to decide and to make a decision to ship your data somewhere else, like to Power BI, let's say. And this means that for most of us, like web developers, we would quite often have to bring all that data and all those analytics in-house, and we will have to build data visualizations on top of it, so we don't ship our valuable users' data to third parties, especially outside of Europe. And obviously, we cannot skip the topic of VR, AR, MR, XR, whatever you want to call it. So if there is anything special about data visualization in that space, it remains to be seen. So Microsoft released Power BI for HoloLens, and there is basically nothing special, nothing related to the three-dimensional world in that app. It's just flat app on the surface. Like knee-jerk reaction maybe, you know, to try to make some 3D charts, but this is mostly gimmicky. You know, it's very hard to make sense of any real data in those charts. So yeah, so my key, the key takeaway that I want you to take out of this is that we all come with baggage of building data visualization the same way that we built charts in Excel before, or that were, you know, bestowed upon us from the print media. And just check out the awesome things you can do on the web today. And the next time you need to build charts in your web application, just try to think a little bit outside the box, and maybe you can make your users way more happy than they currently are without them even asking for it. So, and please check out the work my friends at amCharts do. And I also wrote this book. Some of you may have guessed that I don't really like to talk to people. So I need to cope somehow. So I kind of, over the years, I've compiled a number of tricks that I use to make the most out of conferences without being, you know, that loud extroverted person. So I put it in the book, and you can get it for free from this URL. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the conference and enjoy your evening.